as a parent, you're now a father. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're thinking about this a lot. How do we raise our son up in this, especially with a lot of the pressures that are on his generation and, Gen Z? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Just like, how do we approach this? Like, how do we come back to absolute truth? How do we come back to these things?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. It's something I think about a lot, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Especially being a new father.
You will continue
to what degree,
to, yes.
Yeah, I know. To what degree, we keep kind of pushing the boundary of insanity. I'm like, okay, we gotta be towards the end of this era or this phase, right? Because it's, I read an article today about how, there's a big push to change, some of the pedophilia laws to now calling people minor attracted persons maps, and so there's one thing. I mean, children used to be a sacred thing, right? But now that's going to be up for grabs, to some degree. And so, I don't know how far the deconstruction is going to last, but I do think that, there's a story in the Bible that I think is really, really interesting. And it's in the Old Testament, and I forget who this guy is. I cannot believe I'm blanking on this guy's name, but essentially it was like 3 generations from the main guy. They went into this banquet and they refused to drink. And they said, it's a custom in our family that we wouldn't drink, and it was not because drinking is bad, but there was something in that family DNA that even 3 generations later, they were still doing this thing that their forefather had kind of like taught them how to do, And so I think that there's something to spiritual formation in the home, I think is the core thing. And I mean, we just cannot let go of that responsibility to culture. I think one of the things that my wife and I think about is how do you contend with social media when you're trying to raise children, because it's such, I think that the reality is if you don't take like a really strong approach, and I don't mean like force of hand, but I'm just like talking about from the time, if you don't spend time with your kids, if you don't develop them, if you don't really sow into them, probably the hours it's going to take to do this, culture is going to raise your kids,
Absolutely.
So for us, I think it's trying to figure out like, how do we do this in a way that allows them to kind of grow and develop and make their own choices, to some degree. Obviously you can't just take them away from culture and society. That's right. That's not going to work either, so right. I'm not sure how we're going to do it yet, to be totally honest with you. I just know that it's possible. I think that it's going to be, I think if you have 2 intentional parents working on this, I think that they're going to be able to figure it out. But I'm not sure. I'm not, I haven't done it yet. So
well, and I mean, a lot of that is going to be led by the Holy Spirit. I mean, to be honest, I mean, we can look at this intellectually, right? And we have to some degree of breaking down. Okay, well, this is happening in society. It started with this, and blah blah blah. I think that's important. But at the end of the day, ultimately, God will lead us if we listen to Him and we are led by Him. He will. And so, I was actually praying about this yesterday, so Lord, about just because my wife and I don't have kids yet, but we've been talking about it and realizing like a lot of millennials were raised by institutions. We were raised by, like, like they call them the latchkey generation, the after school program latchkey, where, just watching whatever was on TV and whatever was on the radio and all these things. And we've reaped what we've sown. And so I was talking to the Lord about that and just realizing like, I will deal with whatever was produced in me as a result of that, so that it's not reciprocated, it's not repeated in my children, And so I think it starts there, just recognizing, even in yourself, talking about raising up next generations is analyzing ourselves and allowing ourselves to go to war for future generations rather than just falling into like autopilot,
100%. I so agree with that. I mean, I think that whatever, there's a point where fathers need to grapple with the reality that, they at some point might be the reason why their family is no longer growing because of things that they haven't dealt with, and that's a wild thought.
That's heavy.
I mean, it's something that, dude, I think that you're taking the right approach. I'm the same way, just like whatever is in me, God, like, and I mean, marriage does stuff to you, Drew. It's like, you have no idea that was in you. It's like a sponge and it's just being squeezed out. And you're like, wow, I had no idea that was in my sponge.
Man.
And kids is the same thing, but it's amazing, and I think that's exactly what God intended with it, So I think that, you know, staying humble, staying submitted to that, you know, realizing that it's no longer just you, but like if you don't figure this stuff out, like if you don't walk through this stuff, you're probably going to limit the way your kids develop, you know, because of that. So
Mhm.
I think that's a great, I mean, like Jocko says, you know, taking ownership over that, you know.
Yep. Oh yeah. Love Jocko.